My dear friends, there comes a time in life when our deepest wounds don't come from strangers, but from those who raised us often, our fathers. And yet, many of us carry this silent weight, a sense of abandonment, unworthiness, or unmet expectations, all tied to the image of our father. But healing does not begin with anger. It begins with understanding. We must realize something crucial. Our fathers, too, were sons. They were shaped by their own battles, their own traumas, their own limitations. Your father may not have given you the love you needed, but maybe he gave what he could, not what you deserved. When you stop expecting your father to have been perfect, when you stop measuring your worth based on what he could not give, that's when the healing begins. We do not forgive to free them. We forgive to free ourselves. So, understand this. Your father may have been flawed even deeply, but the pain you carry is your responsibility to release. Let go of the story that he had to be something more for you to be whole. You are whole now once you understand. His failure is not your identity. His silence is not your destiny. His absence is not your fate. Understand him not to excuse him, but to liberate yourself. Only then will you stop bleeding from a wound your father didn't even know he caused. Only then will you truly heal. Many of us walk through life carrying a quiet storm inside the echoes of what our father did or didn't do. Some were never told, "I love you." Some were made to feel invisible. Others were hurt emotionally, mentally, or even physically by the very man who was supposed to protect them. And what do we do with that pain? We bury it, we get angry, we blame, we say, "If only he had done this. If only he had loved me the way I needed. If only he hadn't left." But here is a truth that is hard to accept. Blame feels powerful, but it keeps us powerless. Because blame focuses on them, and healing must begin with you. Understanding, however, is the gateway to inner freedom. It requires maturity. It requires stillness. It requires asking, why was he that way? What pain shaped him? What did he never receive from his own father? What culture, trauma, belief system, or burden formed the man who raised you? This does not mean excusing harmful behavior. It does not mean pretending everything was okay. But it means rising above the wound long enough to see the source of it. When you begin to understand your father's limitations, not just his actions, you start to detach your identity from his shortcomings. You start to see that your suffering is not just about what happened, but about the meaning you gave to it. And when that meaning changes, you begin to heal. Healing is not about forgetting. It's not even about fixing the relationship. It's about seeing it clearly, without the fog of anger, guilt, or shame. Blame keeps the pain alive. Understanding gives it a voice and then, eventually, a release. It is easy to look at our father through the lens of pain, through the moments he failed to show up, through the words he never said, through the protection he never offered. But rarely do we pause to ask ourselves a profound and often painful question. What shaped the man who shaped me? Your father was not born as your father. He was once a child, a boy, fragile and impressionable, just like you once were. He too had dreams, fears, and emotional needs, and he too was molded not always by love, but by survival, by expectation, by trauma, by silence. Perhaps he grew up in an environment where emotions were punished, not expressed, where crying was seen as weakness and affection was considered unnecessary. Maybe his father, your grandfather, was cold, distant, or abusive. Maybe he never once heard, "I'm proud of you," and so he never learned to say it either. So he built walls, not out of strength, but out of fear, not to push you away, but because he didn't know how to come closer. Understanding this doesn't make your pain disappear, but it helps you see a truth beyond your wound. Your father didn't fail you because you were unworthy. He failed you because he was never taught how to succeed emotionally. Many fathers walk around with unhealed pain. They carry emotional debts they never paid, burdens they never voiced, and regrets they buried deep inside. And often they pass those wounds down not because they want to, but because they don't know another way. Your father may have been physically present, but emotionally absent. He may have been strict, controlling, or unavailable. And yet, beneath all of that, was a man operating from his own set of wounds. This is the beginning of a deeper understanding, recognizing that hurt people even when they love them, even when they're your parent. You don't have to justify what he did, but to heal, you must recognize that what he did was not born in a vacuum. It came from somewhere, from something often generations deep. When you begin to see your father not as a towering figure who was supposed to have all the answers, but as a human being flawed, scared, limited, you begin to see clearly, and with clarity comes space. Space for compassion, space for truth, space for the healing that no longer waits for his change, but begins with your insight. This is one of the hardest truths to accept when you're carrying emotional pain from your father. He may have loved you in his own way, but the way he showed it may not have been what your heart needed. We often grow up believing that love should look a certain way: warmth, support, attention, protection. And when those things are missing, we start to question our own value. We start to wonder, why wasn't I enough? Why couldn't he show up for me? Why didn't he love me like I needed to be loved? But here's the truth. Your father's love may have been limited not by your worth, but by his capacity. Maybe he provided for you materially, but never looked you in the eyes and said he was proud. Maybe he worked long hours, believing that sacrifice was love, but never realized that presence meant more than money. Maybe he believed discipline was love, because that's all he ever knew growing up. So while you waited for affection, he offered rules. While you longed for encouragement, he gave criticism. While you needed a father, he was still trying to become a man himself. You see, people often give what they've been taught to give, and many fathers were never taught the language of emotional connection. They speak in actions, in silence, in structure, but not in vulnerability. And yet, that doesn't mean you weren't worthy of more. There's a quiet tragedy in realizing this. The absence of love in the form you needed doesn't mean love was absent, but that love was perhaps lost in translation, filtered through fear, through generational patterns, through unhealed pain. So, what do we do with this? We learn to separate two things: the intention behind what was given, the reality of what was needed. You can acknowledge that your father may have been doing the best he could, and at the same time, you can still mourn the version of love you never received. It's not betrayal to admit that you were hurt, and it's not disloyal to say, he tried, but it wasn't enough, because healing means telling the whole truth, not just about what happened, but about how it made you feel. And once you understand that he may have given all he could, you can finally stop asking him for what he was never equipped to give. That's when your energy shifts from waiting for something outside you to building the love inside you that you always deserved. There is a silent hunger many of us carry into adulthood, a longing for a father's approval. Not just a nod of acceptance, but a moment where he looks at you and says, I see you, I'm proud of you, you are enough. That moment for some never comes, and so we wait, we strive, we overachieve. We push ourselves to the limit, hoping that maybe, just maybe, it will finally earn the love we didn't receive. But what if you're seeking something from someone who doesn't know how to give it? What if you've built your entire sense of worth around chasing a form of validation that was never within his capacity? Some fathers are emotionally closed off. Some are so hardened by their own life experience that they don't even understand the value of affirmation. Some withhold love as a way of control, and some, tragically, just don't know you're not the real you because they never took the time to look beyond the surface. And yet, here you are, still waiting. Still wondering if he'll change, still hoping that one day he'll show up differently, softer, more open, more aware. But this waiting becomes a form of quiet self-abandonment, because every time you tie your self-worth to his validation, you hand over your power to someone else's limitations. Understand this: if a man cannot see his own worth, how can he reflect yours? If he has never healed, how can he help you feel whole? If he never learned to express love, how will he suddenly know how to give it just because you need it? This is not a reflection of your unworthiness, it's a reflection of his unreadiness, and so a turning point comes when you realize that continuing to seek what cannot be given is not only painful, it is harmful. You're no longer a child waiting at the window. You are an adult with the power to turn inward and ask, why do I still need his permission to be enough? You don't need your father to approve of your life for it to be meaningful. You don't need him to understand you fully in order to honor your truth. You don't need his praise to know you are doing well. There is great freedom in realizing that the person you've been waiting for is you, because when you stop looking outward for something that was never there, you begin to see how much strength, value, and beauty you've carried all along without anyone's approval. When you've been hurt, especially by a parent, the idea of forgiveness can feel like betrayal. It can feel like you're letting them off the hook, as if forgiving means pretending that the pain never happened, that the silence didn't echo in your heart for years, that the words he never said didn't matter. But that's not what forgiveness is. Forgiveness does not erase the past. It releases its grip on your present. Forgiveness is not saying, what you did was okay. It's saying, I refuse to carry the weight of your actions any longer. Because anger, no matter how justified, is a heavy thing to hold. It eats at your peace, clouds your mind, and keeps you chained to the very person who hurt you. And often, the person you're angry with has long since moved on or never fully understood the damage they caused to begin with. You may be waiting for an apology that will never come, waiting for them to admit their mistakes, to show remorse, to finally understand the depth of your pain, but sometimes that apology lives only in your imagination. So, what do? You forgive not for them, but for you. You forgive so you can finally breathe without bitterness, so you can stop rehearsing the same painful memories over and over again, so you can sleep at night without that silent ache in your chest, so you can choose your future instead of being defined by your past. Forgiveness is an act of courage. It requires you to face the wound without flinching. It requires you to feel everything: the grief, the anger, the sadness, and then decide that those emotions will not be your identity. You are not what happened to you. You are not the child who was overlooked, or the teen who felt invisible, or the adult still trying to make sense of the silence. You are the one who gets to choose. Choose whether the story ends in resentment or in reclamation, and in that choice, in that sacred moment of saying, I no longer need you to change for me to be free, there is power, there is peace. Forgiveness is not a weakness. It is the strength to walk away from the prison of pain and into the presence of peace. There is a silent inheritance we carry from our parents, not just the shape of our eyes or the sound of our voice, but the emotional patterns, unspoken fears, and unresolved traumas passed down through generations. Sometimes we don't even realize it, but we begin to live out the very behaviors we once resented. You find yourself getting angry the way he did. You find yourself shutting down emotionally, just like he used to. You hear his voice in your head when you make mistakes, not comforting, but critical, not guiding, but shaming, and you ask yourself, am I becoming him? It's a terrifying thought, because we spend our youth trying to escape their shadow, and yet, somehow, we end up walking in their footsteps. But here is a truth that can change everything. You are allowed to choose a different path. Just because pain was passed down to you doesn't mean you are required to carry it any further. You can break the pattern. You can question what you were taught. You can pause and say, this ends with me. This is not rebellion. This is reclamation. You are reclaiming your right to live as your true self, not as a product of inherited dysfunction. And this doesn't mean denying where you came from. It means deciding where you're going. Yes, your father may have been emotionally unavailable, but you can learn to be emotionally present. Yes, he may have withheld affection, but you can learn to give love freely. Yes, he may have chosen silence, but you can choose to speak, to heal, to listen, to grow. This is the power of conscious living. You stop operating on autopilot, repeating the same wounds. Instead, you become aware. You become intentional. You become free. And freedom doesn't mean perfection. It means giving yourself permission to evolve beyond the limitations you inherited. Your story is not bound to your father's story. You are not doomed to his regrets. You are not trapped in his mistakes. You are not destined to repeat his absence, his rage, his silence. You have the power right now to rewrite the script, to become the parent, the partner, the person you once needed. Because healing is not only about looking back, it's about deciding who you become next. There is a pain that sits quietly in the background of so many lives, the pain of absence. Not always physical absence, but emotional. The kind of absence where someone is in the room, but never really with you. The kind where you grew up seeing your father's face, but never truly felt his presence. Or maybe he was never there at all. Maybe you waited on birthdays. Maybe you stood in schoolyards looking for someone who never came. Maybe you learned to stop expecting, because expecting only brought disappointment. And so, over time, a silent question forms in the back of your heart. If he didn't stay, what does that say about me? Was I not lovable enough? Was I not worthy of being protected? Was I too much or not enough? But here's what you must understand. His absence says everything about him and nothing about you. You were always worthy, even when he didn't see it, even when he couldn't hold it, even when he walked away from it. His inability to show up does not diminish your value. Your existence, your emotions, your story, they are all valid. You are not a half being missing pieces because someone else refused to be present. You are whole right now as you are. Wholeness isn't about having every external piece in place, the perfect childhood, the perfect family, the perfect parent. Wholeness is about embracing the truth of your experience and knowing that you still have the power to live fully. You are not broken because someone else failed to show up. You are not incomplete because he didn't teach you how to be a man, or how to feel safe, or how to love yourself. You are learning all of that now. You are doing the work he never did, and that in itself is a miracle. The father wound may leave a scar, but it does not define your identity. You are not your father's mistakes. You are not your childhood trauma. You are not the echo of someone else's silence. You are the voice that rises anyway. You are the heart that stays open, despite the pain. You are the one who decided that your future does not have to match your past. You are whole not because your story is without pain, but because you are learning to carry that pain with strength, awareness, and grace. You are whole because everything you thought was missing already lives within you. So now, take a deep breath. Not just into your lungs, but into your story. You've carried pain that was never yours to hold. You've chased love that should have been given freely. You've tried to fill a silence that never had your name on it. But today, you stop chasing. Today, you stop waiting. Today, you start returning not to the past, but to yourself. Because healing is not about changing your father. It's about no longer letting his shadow dictate your light. It's about standing in front of the mirror, seeing the cracks and still calling yourself whole. You may never get the apology. You may never hear the words you longed to hear, but you don't need them anymore. because the peace you've been searching for in him is something you are finally ready to give to yourself. So let this be the beginning not of forgetting, but of releasing, not of erasing, but of rewriting. Your story, your healing, your life, it belongs to you now.